Bonjour à tous et à toutes, c'est Morrigan et on arrive à la vidéo finale de ma preview de Final Shape avec cette interview des développeurs que j'ai eu la chance de pouvoir faire. Alors en fait j'étais accompagnée de deux autres créateurs de contenu, on était trois, ce qui était un peu plus sympa niveau discussion. Donc vous allez avoir une ou deux questions qui vont être posées par Maven et Nexus Gaming, soyez pas étonnés si d'un coup pouf il y a des personnages que vous ne connaissez pas. La majorité des questions seront quand même de mon fait, j'ai essayé de vous monter ça de sorte qu'il n'y ait pas de silence, de moments pas forcément intéressants, voilà. Donc ça s'enchaîne plutôt bien, c'est normal, hein, c'est que c'est monté bien entendu. Et je vous ai mis bien sûr les sous-titres en français, ça a été un gros travail. Donc j'espère que ça vous plaira, j'ai mis tout mon cœur, c'est pas forcément la meilleure traduction qui soit, après c'était de l'anglais parlé, hein, donc parfois je peux pas vous traduire parfaitement ce qui se dit, c'était une discussion essentiellement, c'était pas une vidéo présentée comme ce qu'on peut avoir par Bungie des fois quand ils nous font les vidocs. Donc j'ai fait ce que j'ai pu, j'espère que ce sera assez clair et surtout que ça vous plaira, ça vous intéressera. Pour moi il y a pas mal de choses intéressantes dans ce qu'ils disent dans cette vidéo, je suis très contente de cette interview et j'espère que ça vous intéressera aussi, n'hésitez pas à partager bien entendu et on se retrouve très vite du coup pour la sortie de Final Shape.
Hello, thank you for joining us. We're going to speak with Ben Womack, who's the combat area lead.
Hello.
He worked on Red and Prismatic, and then Kat, who's the expansion project lead, about the Final Shape. Yeah, I know you all have been playing a lot the last couple of days. What's up? You have any questions for them?
Yes, thank you. So first question, what were the main inspirations for Final Shape?
When we first started the concept for the Final Shape, we had this I'm probably not gonna get the actual sentence right, but it was about hey, you're going with your closest allies on a journey into oblivion kind of thing. And so we really wanted to provide this feeling of, okay, it's kind of the end of the world, and you and the Vanguard members and those characters that we really care about are going into this very dangerous journey into the Traveler to fight the Witness. So that was a big thing. And then obviously when we started kind of tearing apart all those words and what does that mean, we got a lot of inspiration from some of the even actual Destiny art that we had around the pyramids and what the Witness has done. And so we saw all these little pieces of distorted pieces, you can see some of this in Vow and whatever, and there's all these weird statues. And so when we started to be okay, as you progress through the destination, you want to see you want to feel more of the presence of the Witness and kind of understand what the Final Shape is, even from just the environment. And so we started introducing a bunch of what does it mean to feel uneasy and eerie and weird and not right. And so we started taking a bunch of inspirations, and there's a bunch of really cool concept art of our artists just going crazy on playing around with dimensions of things and body parts and hands everywhere and whatever. And that was that kind of clicked it for us. It's just okay, we really want to make sure that this journey starts from a place of familiarity, but still a little weird. And then as you progress through the campaign and through the destination, it gets weirder and weirder as you get closer to the Witness and kind of feel that influence. So that was definitely something that we took into account when developing the art. Yeah,
I would add that there's always been understood about the project, about this is the end of that Light and Dark saga, that 10-year journey, and the expectations that brings for players, but the expectations we have as well. So I see a lot of in the journey the Cat just described that is very intentionally supposed to be reminiscent of the journey of the game from the beginning until now. Starting basically when you're in the Traveler and that mission, and it's you're in a nature-driven humanity, kind of earthy world, appearing to be with the D1 tower. You meet a familiar face there, Cade, and it then spirals into this adventure into harsher and harsher lands to end at the Witness at the very end of it, which is what this 10-year journey is about.
And we also wanted to have these moments of nostalgia and kind of really honor the time and the how long people have been playing Destiny and kind of involved in the world. And so that's where we were okay, it would be really cool to bring a D1 tower back. Mm-hmm. But again, it's with a little twist. And so all these places and locales that are familiar with players, we wanted to bring that in and have those feelings of, oh, I remember when and kind of that reflection on that whole journey that it's been to be a Guardian.
What are the plans for Prismatic after the final shape release?
So Prismatic and the future updates on it is really like important subject to us because it is a core part of the game. We're introduced like we don't want to introduce such a big part of the sandbox like Prismatic and not have it be an evergreen feature that lives in the game forever. Like that's really important for us in the future of Destiny. And so yeah, Prismatic is here to stay. And how we update it, we're actually looking at launch and the reaction at launches to help us kind of understand what we want to like exactly pivot and push towards. Like we're going to be looking at the first day, the first few days, up into the raid launch, the weeks after. And the responses there are going to not only inform tuning passes and balance passes we're going to try to do, and the reaction as fast as we can, but also what updates we want to do. Because there's a lot of potential if Prismatic, and but at the same time, like we tried really hard to give a complete package of each color on the first foray of what Prismatic is introduced in the final shape. So, but you can look at that, you can think, oh, what if I added more supers? What if I added more, like another round of aspects or fragments or grenades or whatever? And so there's a lot of possibility, but we want to make the right decision and not just like throw everything in. Okay. Like we've been very intentional with what we put in the Prismatic kits for players to try to like have a great but balanced experience.
All right.
A question you can all answer separately. What's the thing you're the most looking forward for player to discover?
Ooh, that we can talk about?
Then we can talk about
We can talk about.
I'm gonna steal your answer probably, but I really want to say that like I'm excited to see what happens in that first few weeks of people just getting their hands on like the full Prismatic kit and see what like combinations they get to make and like wild builds they get to make and like stuff that like we've play tested this game so much, but I'm sure like there's more to find out. Like there's always something else, and so I'm kind of excited, and a little worried about like what's gonna happen when we release this out in the wild.
Yeah. That was my number 2 answer. So you're
close. There you go. I think so.
But my number 1 answer is actually about the exotic class item. There was a question someone had earlier about the surprise of getting exotic they remembered from early Destiny days, and I had a moment that was kind of like that with the exotic class item in playtesting. I actually was playtesting the activity that's going to launch after the raid launches, that you can get exotic class items as a reward out of, and it has a random roll of these different selected perk pools. And I got the reward at the end of the activity, and I looked at the perks, and all of a sudden I was like, oh wait, I can make this other build work, and I immediately started then switching up what I was doing, because I hadn't expected to get that combination, and once I saw it, it made me think about what I wanted to do with my Prismatic build. And that kind of like broke my expectations a little, which was good. It felt like I felt like there was something new that I could then like play around with that otherwise I hadn't had, as opposed to, these days everyone kind of knows the exotics coming down the pipe already. Maybe you know how to get them. And maybe it's exactly where you're going to get it. But with the exotic class item, there's enough interesting parts that are kind of hard to predict, I think, that I hope that players will get a role in it that will inspire them to move their build around and try out some new stuff and have a lot of fun with it.
Do you guys have any?
Are we in here now?
I'm pulling you in.
Yeah, I would say like the journey almost. This is the Pale Heart is like our first linear campaign destination, and it was cool to see every mission open up the map and see that you're going deeper and deeper, and then you look around and it looks different, and it was like an interesting like feeling to know that I'm getting closer, I'm getting deeper into the destination. I can't go back, I can only go forward, and it was interesting. I like that.
I have one about that. Are there going to be second supers for Stasis and Strand? Because there's only one. Like, there should be more.
And I will say that the fact that we don't have more does pain me, like my soul. Like, I want to have more. Like the top, like when we look at abilities and subclasses and making more of each one, we're trying to find like the right time to make any of them, because I don't like take Witch Queen launch. We did Void 3.0. We had a lot of good reasons why we did that. Mm-hmm. And we're like, we also did some Stasis Supers. It's like, wait a minute, does that make sense? Does that fit? Does that make the release better? Does that get everyone excited about the whole package, or does it feel weird in there? And so we really try to like time things and get ideas that we have, and there's usually a lot of ideas that are been floated for a long time, oriented for the right release that's going to like have the best impact on players in the ecosystem. And so like with the new supers that we made, we were like, let's do an homage back to D2 launch. Let's do a Void Titan super, let's do an Arc Hunter super, and let's do a Solar Warlock super. And the team had wanting to make those supers for years. So before even like Stasis was actually made, we're like, we want to fill these out. You know, what are the ways to get new light supers? Yeah, and so that was part of like the core like of that made sense to do it at that time. And Prismatic is very much the same, and like the ideas for Prismatic that had been bubbling for a long time, the right time to do Prismatic was the final shape. And so to answer your question, like we want to do more strand supers and more stasis supers, and we're trying to find the right time to do that because the future of Destiny is still like way ahead of us.
I noticed the new map is a little bit different with a lot of mini events linked to the new overthrow activity. How many new events have been added to this?
I don't know the exact number, but we were trying to be like, okay, can overthrow be this activity that you have in like this one area that is like kind of all encompassing, and no matter where you go, you have like new activities to find, and they all have their own bespoke like mechanics, and you kind of like it's exciting to roam around and figure out what's the fastest and most fun way to fill out like all the stuff that you have to get to 1,000 kind of thing. And so yeah, there's a bunch of like all the areas have different mini events, like the ones you're calling them, kind of all spread out. So I think it's going to be really fun. Like we wanted to make sure that post campaign completion and when the destination opens up for you, you had the reason to like actually roam around and be around, not only on the type of rewards that we're giving the players from completing these activities over and over again, but also to explore. Because like Carlos said before, like we did the destination for the campaign in a very like linear fashion, in that you start from one point and you go to point B. But there's tons of like little things to explore kind of all around, right? Like you'll still have your lost sectors and like all the different activities. You'll have secret stuff to find out, and so we wanted to make being in the destination and spending time there like as exciting and fun as possible. So yeah, there's a ton there.
What was the inspiration for the new enemies?
Yeah, that was actually I don't even know how long we've been trying to ask ourselves. It's been many years of what is the enemies, like the army of the witness that we want to make. It's actually, we've had ideas that have been like piled up for a long time. And this turned into, again, the final shape feeling it's the right time to finally do some of these things. And so we wanted to base the themes off of what the witness is about, what it's trying to do. So it's about these reconfiguring of like things and beings and people to like the shape that it feels is like the best, the final shape of it. So you have these essentially these altered beings. And so the place we actually started was an interesting place to think of a new faction, because we don't make a lot of new factions in Destiny's history. It's very expensive, it takes a long time. We want it to really hit very well, because if you don't have it like working with the release, then potentially like, why am I fighting those? I don't understand them. You want to make sure all that is like very like easy to grasp and fun. And so we asked ourselves, what if we make the hardest enemies in the faction first? And that actually led to us making the Tormentor early for Lightfall, to kind of like get the dread starting to be figured out. Then we made the subjugators, and then we made essentially the soldier units, which is like the attendant, the weaver, and the grim, and the husk, to like figure out like where is the top end and what do they look like and how they represent the other ones in the faction. And so all that turned into us, like I said, making a very strong, like scary looking faction of enemies that feel appropriate for the biggest bad that Destiny's had, like the one behind the Light and Dark saga for the last 10 years. And I think it made them all have this feeling of like universal feeling that they're these manipulated creatures that are completely under control of the witness through its own design.
They're very metal.
Very metal, yeah. They're super metal. Watch a lot of Heavy Metal 2000.
I like it.
That was just me, though. It wasn't actually the team.
Do you feel it was responsible to give a bat a gun?
I feel like it was the best decision we ever made. Actually, the fun side note about that is the flapping wings. That was one of those ideas that the team was like, in Final Shape, we're working on development. Like, it's finally time to do the bat wings on a unit. We want to do bat wings. We want to do the wings.
Yeah, and then always when making just to add on some of what Ben was saying, like we always look at like what is interesting to add to like even existing enemies and factions, because you see the Dread like work together with other factions. Like what are like fun gameplay ideas that like will add some diversity into how you approach like every encounter and every enemy. Like bats with guns is great to add verticality into an encounter of like, oh, there's a grim there, so like you kind of like have to aim high and low and like see. And it you could see some of that even with like the Tormentor back in Lightfall. Like they are these like massive like anchor units. You have to pay attention. You have to play their game. Like you're not playing your game. And so that's something that we try to bring with the subjugators, which are more imposing, and then all the other adds and units of like how do we fill that like gameplay space in interesting and fun ways. So yeah.
There are always new players coming to Destiny, and I think it's a good thing. And how do you take this into account? Would there be some reminders for them? Something to feel immersed?
That's a really good question. And we're always like, with each expansion, we try to like make sure that it is a welcome experience for new players. So there's a couple things that we've done like throughout the past couple years, to make the game like a little more welcome to new players. So like things that already exist, like we added the new missions on the timeline that are basically like catch-up missions of like, hey, what happened in the story? So like new players can go do that as part of the New Light, and kind of catch up on like, hey, what happened with Kate? How Kate died? What was that? And kind of like catch you up on D2. One thing that we're adding with the Final Shape is actually, why do I keep sidekicking? I keep forgetting the word, which is the problem. Which is sidekicking for power. So like if you are bringing in friends, which we see a lot happen in Destiny, and like new players generally do come in and like because someone talked about Destiny with them and they're like, hey, come play, and they come play, and then it's like, oh, but now they have to get their power up and do all this content and get a bunch of the weapons and whatever. And we're trying to like lower that gap narrow that gap as much as we possibly can. And so with sidekicking now, it's the power of the fire team leader that really counts to jump into an activity. And so that will allow people to like get together, play more of the activities together without that being like a huge friction point. And then it's New Light, and we have also the first six ranks of Guardian ranks, we believe are like very targeted in terms of, hey, go do these things and you like kind of experience the breadth of Destiny.
Yeah, it's like it's playing a bit of a like guide at the same time. Yeah.
We have a catch-up cinematic at the beginning?
Yes.
Oh yeah, we always do these like previously on cinematics. Yeah. So we have, I don't know if you guys got to see it early before M1, before the first mission, but we do have a previously on, which is basically like 2 minutes of here's everything that happened. And so like that's also like how we expose players to the story.
It's not gonna like get 9 years of stuff. But,
no, not that.
It's a little bit.
And then I will say one thing about the Final Shape specifically. Like we have this like really crisp moment of storytelling with the Final Shape that I think is actually very beneficial for new players, and I think makes it a really good moment to come in, because it is like, we know what we're doing. Here's our mission. We gotta get into the Traveler. We are going with our closest allies, the Vanguard, which most people know about, and you have to like progress through this destination to get to the Witness and fight the Witness. And that is like in terms of like actual storytelling and how to get absorbed into like what's happening, that we find out that players can wrap their heads around that particular like, oh, we understand what the motivation is and we understand what we're doing at every step of the way, which is like really good for new players coming in and kind of experiencing the Final Shape if they want to jump into that directly.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much. I appreciate the thoughtful questions.